Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we talk about complex, supernatural, spiritual subjects. And today's video, I want to talk about this kind of unholy alliance between materialists, the philosophy of kind of mainstream scientific academics that has perpetually held back the entire spectrum of, I guess, spirituality, metaphysics, para stuff, the emerging paradigm. At least they want to believe that they've been able to hold it all back. But I don't dip too much into this debate that much because things are just speeding along full steam, and there's no reason to get caught up so much in the critics, despite the power they still wield, or at least the power that they think they wield. In reality, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Who said that? Was that Lincoln? I forget. Anyway, was it Edison? Somebody refresh my memory. Whose quote was that attributed to? Anyway, so this is based off of this doozy of an article by a guy named Michael Graziano on, big surprise, Huffington Post. And it's titled, "The Spirit The Spirit Ends When the Brain Dies." Your standard debunking type of pro-materialist article that just reinforces this whole weird subculture that exists only to deny other people's experiences and to deny an entire branch of scientific inquiry and to replace it with what has been the status quo for obviously since the Enlightenment, but something that has no practical benefit for anybody who gets involved, because the evidence doesn't suggest these things, and adopting these ideas as a philosophy does nothing but spiral people into depression. But I also want to talk about the alliance that's been made between materialism and hoaxers and scammers that overrun these subjects. So that's a big problem, so I have a little commentary about that. Before we begin, a couple points of interest. Let's see, so I'm just in Krakow, Poland right now, in another hostel as usual. Next week I am going to Barcelona, where I will be attending the UFOlogy World Conference. And I'm pretty excited about that. It's put on by my friend L. Light. You can see an interview with her maybe about a couple dozen videos back on this channel. We met in India. I got the invite to come to the conference. Maybe I'll even be live streaming something when I'm there, possibly off of the Facebook group. And there's some interesting people going there, including scientist Mikio Kaku, who is one of the most eminent mainstream scientists in the world. And here he is, keynote speaking at a UFO conference, if that gives you any idea about how much the materialists are losing their grip on the paradigm, because you have people flat out showing interest in stuff that they would never imagine anybody taking seriously. So that's kind of interesting. What else? And also, if you are new around this channel and you like what I have to say, go down, hit that subscribe button, and make sure the notification bell on the right side is lit up. It's not grayed out. That's the only way sometimes to even know when I come out with new videos, because that will alert you on YouTube that I have a new video coming out. So it's really helpful. So to continue, so this article is a lot of the usual claptrap that you hear from materialists, and it reminds me of the line from, there was this film with Joe Pesci called My Cousin Vinny, and basically Joe Pesci's character had to save his nephews from a basically like a murder charge, a death sentence, by using his community college law degree, and he didn't have any experience at all actually being in a courtroom. But he ended up doing, of course, a great job. That's a clever film. And then he had this one line where he's like, the argument that you're going to see today, it's like this playing card. It's very symmetrical. It looks well crafted. It fits with all the other playing cards in the deck. There's nice art, nice imagery on the card. It looks like something that's completely legit, but what you'll find out is it's actually paper thin, as thin as a playing card, and that's what my opponent's arguments consist of. paper-thin arguments. Well, I think Vinny's analogy works very well with these materialist arguments. So you see a lot of the same old stuff about brain damage alters personalities. Hippocrates, the Greek philosopher, was a materialist. Brain damaging diseases, mind altering diseases hurts our individualities or our sense of self. He talks about Aristotle, Descartes. So again, it's like kind of like going back in time through history to look at all these other minds and say, well, look at all these other minds who agree with my points, therefore I'm right, while leaving out the fact that some of the greatest minds in the history of the world were not materialists. I mean, people like Edison and Tesla were both proponents of ITC/EVP communication with deceased people. Or don't even get me started on like somebody like John Logie Bard or William Crookes and some of these guys. So he cites a couple of these guys in history who are materialists. He talks about brain damage. Talks about how you can electrify the brain and stimulate certain emotions, and all of this. And then then there's some kind of some video by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is again supposed to mean something, but it doesn't mean anything. And why? So why is this argument being promoted still? Why are people pushing this kind of thing? I see Neil Tyson is still on my browser window. Let me get him out of there. Let me get him out of there before he stinks up my channel. Okay, so why are these things being promoted like this? Why is this agenda being pushed, and what's causing them to go on the offensive? Probably because, as the tide changes, some of these guys who are the harbingers of the institution, of the machine, of the system, of what we see as academia, I would see as a branch of the so-called deep state, the machine that wants to keep all of us entrapped, that wants to keep us in one old paradigm, that wants us to believe that our potential is is just unfathomably smaller than it really is. It wants to keep us depressed on pharmaceutical drugs to cope with that depression, and a number of other things. This machine sometimes feels threatened because a lot of people are rebelling against it. So a institution like the Huffington Post will come along and decide to rehash the old tropes all over again to put all the little drones back in line where they're supposed to be. So in a nutshell, that's what this is. Now, of course, these arguments, you can really break them down. People who promote duality, or who promote animism, or who promote that the mind is a receiver or transmitter of consciousness, does not equate to consciousness. Nobody makes the claim that brain damage doesn't alter behavior, that memories can't be changed. We all recognize that there is a brain and it greatly affects consciousness. There's no question about that. In fact, actually, the author makes a mistake by saying the spirit ends when the brain dies in the title of the video, because true materialists wouldn't say that there's such a thing as a spirit. So there wouldn't be a spirit to end, because there is no consciousness, there is no spirit, there is no soul. To begin with, we're all just machines who are illusions. And that's one step above what this guy is saying, and a lot of them believe that as well. It's called eliminative materialism. That's part of this cult religion that they promote. This kind of religion of fatalism that has infected a good chunk, but I don't believe the majority, but the institutional powers that be. So again, so people who basically support what I write about, we don't make the claim that the brain doesn't do these things. We know that the brain does affect all of these elements. It's just that we're not naive enough to use that to disclude all the enormous amount of evidence that stuff is happening outside the brain. Okay, so the egregious logical fallacy that these guys make is that they say, well, because this and that happened, and I don't know what the term might be. I know this must be a fallacy written someplace in the, I'm not a philosophy expert. But they conclude because this and that happens, therefore that and this other thing must be wrong. So because I see this happening, that means this other stuff that's happening must be invalid, but we don't know how. So it must be some unexplained thing that we just haven't discovered yet. And you'll see them make this argument sometimes when faced with the evidence. So whether it's NDEs or materializations or ADCs or, gosh, I mean, I can just go on and on, evidential mediumship and just countless areas of evidence. Countless. I go into my first book that Victor Zamet does in victorzamet.com in his famous book, and so many more books. There's just so many areas of evidence. So much, just like for some of us, I mean, it's almost like on the daily that we get some kind of communication with the other side. So it's not a matter of debate whether all that stuff exists. So a good question to ask is that, to what extent does the brain have power over our consciousness here in this body, in this world? And it does seem to have a good amount of power, but this by no means means that the wealth of information about the subject is invalid. And again, so this is an intellectually manipulative article that wants to smear the subject and keep all of the lemmings in line, keep them all herded into one place, worshiping mainstream academia, worshiping science, keeping them on reddit.com where half of these guys hang out, all in this bubble, reinforcing each other's opinions all day long and convincing themselves that nothing outside of that could possibly be real, could possibly exist. And then if somebody comes along, it's like, hey, I had this NDE, and I had this out-of-body experience, or, I met my deceased parents, met my deceased friend, then they all pile on and dismiss and insult those people away, so they can keep reinforcing this narrative that their dismal and nasty, quite pathetic view of the universe is the correct one. So the problem is one of the reasons that this philosophy is so prevalent and keeps going is because in the kind of para world, those of us who do recognize it and do believe in it, we hold it to such a high amount of reverence that we sometimes overlook warning signs, and we also give a lot of power to people who are presenting information of a paranormal variety. Right? And so a lot of people throughout the ages, throughout history, going back to oracles consulting the Roman emperors, people have used the existence of the beyond to harness power and make themselves look like gods. And this is a very long history of this, and it's more powerful than ever in the internet age. So lately I've been just really disheartened hearing about some fake mediums that have been bothering some of the members of this community. I've been hearing about well-known people in the para community who have been called out as frauds. We've had the fake physical mediums. This stuff is really disheartening. I mean, one of the reasons it's so disheartening is because it gives so much ammunition to people like this guy. What's his name again? Michael Graciano. It gives ammunition to the people who want to keep spinning this narrative, because if you have 10 mediums who are real and providing real evidential information, you have one in the group who is a fraud. The people on a political narrative like this, they can use that one fraud to paint all the real ones as also being frauds, and the general public will believe it. And so in this way, the scammers and the fraudsters and the materialists like this guy, they have this symbiotic relationship. And this is one of the main dilemmas facing people in the spiritual communities, to those of us who want to change the paradigm, who want to see civilization step it up to the next level. So the materialists have a stake in the game because they make money from all this, okay? And also their careers depend on it so much that they can't even admit that the things that are very clearly true are true. And the more they toe the party line, the more they're guaranteed like tenure at their university and other benefits. And the hoaxers and the scammers are literally scamming people and making money. So they both have huge stakes in this game, and the materialists rely on the scammers to help keep the subject discredited. And it's very likely to me that many of these scammers are themselves materialist true believers who decide, hey, I bet I can jump in on this, and the people who will pay me money, they had it coming to them anyway because they're so gullible as to believe in spiritual subjects. If I sell them this crystal, if I pretend to be a medium, if I do any of these things, and if I rip them off, hey, because they believe all mediums are frauds, all spiritual healers are frauds, they just have to, they're just joining a long circus of the same act that's been going on for a long time. They rationalize it, and then they go into this field just to scam people. These people are, they have some very nasty places awaiting for them from all that built up karma. I guarantee it. We've talked before this channel about negative astral planes, astral domains. These kinds of people who just prey on others are definitely in a queue to go to these types of places. So how do we fight this? Well, there has to still be a higher level of integrity to go with this community. And when it comes to things like fake mediums, we need to keep banding together and calling them out. Okay, there's some people out there like Mark Ireland, I believe is his name, who has an actual compendium of verifiable mediums based on scientific research. Of course, you have the Windbridge Institute. You have Gary Schwartz's research. Mediums have to, subject themselves to a level of scientific scrutiny, and as well as just a high standard of personal evidence that you're bringing to the table. Customers have to be very wary of ways that the fakes will deceive us, including hot reading by looking up your social media accounts, picking up information, and then being able to provide like specific detailed responses or specific detailed areas of information coming through the supposed mediumship session. So customers have to become more aware. The community has to adopt stricter standards, and articles like this one have to be combated, and we have to do that using facts and evidence, reason, and logic. So I oftentimes direct people to go to the Afterlife Topics website. I don't think I'm connected right now, so I don't think I can go there. But it's afterlifetopics.com. There's a little button that says Destroying Debunkers, and that's a list of like 100-some peer-reviewed research papers about everything, including telepathy, mind over matter, remote viewing, afterlife types of incidences, all kinds of things. It's all compiled there on that page. And yeah, a couple of the journals are kind of sketchy, the Journal of Crystals and Homeopathy, but a lot of the journals are not. A lot of the journals are legit peer-reviewed journals, and so you can search through that list. And somebody like this guy, they'd have no answer. You present that information, they're just going to go into cognitive dissonance mode, and they won't even recognize any of it as real. And meanwhile, anybody who's even a little bit logical, rational, and it isn't in this complete denial of the universe will observe a debate like that, and they will rarely side with people like this, because first of all, people like this guy, what they're selling is not very appealing. People know intuitively in their hearts that they are more than just the meat inside their skulls. And so intuitively, we know that this is BS, even to people who don't know about these subjects. And so that right there will always give us a huge advantage in this fight. So the fight goes on, and between the scammers and the materialists, their unholy alliance, if anything, I think we're winning, because even though they have Wikipedia and they have a lot of corners of the internet, they have Reddit, they have social media influence, I swear to God, I think it's China. China is a hardcore communist atheist country, and I think they just donated something like $150 million to Reddit, which blows my mind. And it makes me wonder, hey, where is this materialist orthodoxy coming from? I think it's the commies, but that's just one of my theories. But whatever the case might be, it's never going to work. And even though they seem to have all these platforms, what they don't have is the public support. And that's why these days the public is so restless. Thanks for watching this. But pick up one of my books like Understanding Life After Death or The Afterlife and Beyond over at afterlifetopics.com, and it helps support what I'm doing, helps keep this show on the road. Or you can donate at patreon.com/afterlife topics. A great way to get involved in exclusive interviews and classes, consultations with me, a VIP group, all that stuff if you sign up at the Patreon page, or also at Afterlife Topics. Just head to Afterlife University. We talk about the literal conditions that affect us when we cross over outside of the meat suit, outside of the brain, and begin returning to our true selves. And these guys will never win. They'll never be able to dismiss what we know intuitively to be true. That's it for tonight's commentary. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys possibly here in Krakow, Poland, on the next video.